to the One to Another podcast. Today we're going to talk about communicating your needs effectively. The biggest concern that I hear from most people after they've gone through a loss is that they need good listeners, but they don't have anybody that's willing to listen. And so I want to talk for just a few minutes about the fact that we need good listeners in our lives. One of the things I've learned that a friend's job in difficult circumstances is not to cheer them up, it's to acknowledge the reality of the situation, it's to hear, respect, and love them. It's to show them you haven't given up on them and you haven't walked away. I don't know if you realize this, but in 2018, Pew Research Center asked Americans what gives them meaning in life. Only 7% said helping other people. Only 11% said learning was a source of meaning in their life. Well, I think there's things that we have to learn when it comes to being able to communicate our needs effectively. One of the greatest things we have to learn is to ask for help, because we all need help. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but we need to have help. Asking for help can be really hard, especially if you feel stressed or confused. And most of the time in grief, we're either stressed or confused. Getting the support you need during tough times can help you get through the situation. And it gives you a strategy to deal with the situation and give some perspective. But the greatest challenge we have is the barriers for asking for help. Thinking a problem will go away by itself. Oh, I don't need to ask for help. This problem will just go away. Well, that's not true. Being embarrassed or afraid to ask for help. We just don't want anybody to think that we're weak and we need help, but we're afraid to ask. Thinking you should be able to cope without help. Thinking no one wants to help or will understand. Isn't it amazing how our negative thinking comes in? Thinking things aren't as bad enough to seek help. Not knowing where to find help. Lack of support services nearby. Thinking you'll be judged. What's the matter with you? Can't you figure this out yourself? Thinking help is too expensive and time-consuming. Well, things are expensive when you ask for help sometimes, but there's a lot of volunteers in this world that can help. So we have to understand that there's some benefits for asking for help. When we ask for help, we can feel less stressed, relief about sharing your thoughts and feelings with someone, finding strategies and ways to cope, and that's thinking through, how can I do this? How can I get help? And gaining perspective. I think a whole lot of life after loss is gaining perspective and reducing your sense of loneliness. Because when we start asking for help, we can build stronger relationships with friends, family, or someone that we haven't even met yet who is willing to help. Prevent problems getting bigger. When we ask for help, instead of thinking it's so huge, we can start looking at it thinking, yeah, if I break this down, maybe it's not such a big thing. Maybe we can learn to help others. Because once we find out that someone helps us, maybe we can help others. We all go through tough times and sometimes can't solve problems by ourselves. It's courageous to recognize and ask for help if you need it for any sort of problem. People who are winning understand trust-enhancing power of effective communication. They use active communication and practice as cornerstones for enhancing relationships, building trust, and impacting their lives. Here's some ideas that might help you handle the situation of asking for help better. First of all, don't assume that others are reading your minds. Did you know that? People can't figure out what you need. So you need to know that Complaining about your problems doesn't solve them. Whining about unmet needs won't fulfill them. Whether you want your colleague to communicate with you more often about team projects or put you forward for a more senior role, it's critical to be assertive in conveying what you want and what you need. Sometimes, it's all we need is someone to come over and have a cup of coffee with us. Or maybe we need someone to give us a suggestion of someone we could go to that maybe would help us with a car problem. So whenever we're going through a challenge, when we don't act like we'll wind up and be upset because they didn't help us, but we find somebody that will, then we realize that they couldn't read our mind anyway. And I think it's important to be bold about what you ask for. Don't dilute it. The reality is you'll rarely, if ever, be given more than you have asked for. So don't dilute your request in order to minimize the possibility of being turned down. Think about what your ideal outcome would be and then confidently and courageously ask for it. Not in an entitled way, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that conveys that you know your worth. While you may not always get what you want, you nearly will end up with more than you asked for. So don't be afraid to be bold and ask for what you need. I can remember when my late husband died, I had 100 thank you notes that I had to write. And I was glad to write them, but I couldn't figure out, and that was a long time ago, how I was going to pay for the postage. So I could have used, one of those 100 rolls of postage stamps, but I didn't think I had enough money at that time to buy them. So I was walking with my walking partner that day, and I said, I've got 100 thank you notes that I've written, but I can't afford the stamps. Can't figure out what I'm going to do. And I said, maybe I'll just send out a few at a time and then see if I can maybe handle it that way. She didn't say anything. She just listened. Well, when I went to my mailbox later that day, there was 100 stamps in there. And I knew who they were from. And I just wanted you to know that sometimes when we ask, there's somebody that does take care of our need. So be specific about what you want and when you need it. The biggest reason for unmet expectations is lack of understanding of exactly what was expected. Asking someone to do something soon can be interpreted in all sorts of ways. For a request that holds any water, it needs to be specific and not just to say what you like, but you need to make it clear about when. So it's important to be very specific. Be clear about what you won't tolerate. It's a rule of life that what you get is what you tolerate. Making requests will go a long way to eliminate the tolerations in your life. I have found that when I was going through the loss of my late husband, that when I asked people if they could help me in the food area, I told them that I could not tolerate because I was allergic to fish and mayonnaise. And so I thought, if you can bring something that I can eat, I want you to know that this is a couple of things I can't tolerate. So if you let people know what it is you expect, you'll find yourself in a place where people take care of your requests. So forget hints and be direct. If you like to take the less confrontational and often more cowardly route of dropping hints to get others to behave differently, I have bad news for you. Hints just don't cut it. If you don't want to be ignored, you got to be direct and explicit. Making a general comment to a group, well, it'd be great if people around here would get to meetings on time, is passive and pathetic. Rather, speak directly to the serial latecomer. Let them know you find it disrespectful in everyone's time, and see if they're willing to be punctual in their time in the future. So it's important that you be direct about what you need and ditch the martyr act. It says, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but it's my humble opinion that this point is more for women than for men. And so I have found that we need to stop getting caught in a trap of trying to be all things to all people. We quickly find ourselves falling short on all fronts, winding up being resentful, burned out, not being the person we want to be for anyone, much less for ourselves. So who's that serving? The request being made of you, the more you need to make of others. So by moving your own needs higher, your priority list is therefore not selfish, it's smart. So enough with the guilt-driven martyr act. Don't make no mean more than it does. Let's face it, you won't always get what you ask for. Your neighbor won't always come through with homemade cookies when you need them. But there's sometimes when we have to realize that when people say no, don't treat it as a personal rejection. Accept it graciously and just move on. I always say if I get one no, I'm going to look for 3 yeses. At least now you know where things stand and you can plan accordingly. Asking for less than you really want from yourself and from others in your life doesn't serve anyone. So what is it that you need? Do you need time with someone with coffee? Do you need someone to mow your lawn? Do you need someone to go shopping for you? Do you need someone to babysit? Do you need someone to care for your laundry and do it for a week? Whatever it is, just remember, you'll find people that want to help as long as you learn to say thank you. Thank you is a very important thing to remember, that we all need each other and we all need people that say thank you. I appreciate what you've done, and just give them the biggest hug and the biggest smile. They'll come through for you again. So maybe it's time for you to take some steps and saying, hey, guess what? I need you to come over today and help me plant flowers. Is there any chance you could come between 2 and 4? You could? Great. Well, let's plant flowers and let's have fun. Whatever your need is, we got to be honest enough to say what we need. And I hope that you'll take a few steps forward in your healing by learning to say, here's my need. Is there any way you can help me? You'll find a new friend and you'll be a good friend.